We could try that background. I mean, it's not me, but what the heck?
So we are live.
All right.
Oh, thank you.
All right. Well,
I can't get the
you
filter.
want me to get started?
Yep, you can start, Narce.
Wonderful. Good afternoon. Buenas tardes to everybody. We're calling the meeting to order. The February 14th, 2022 Forest Grove School District Board of Directors meeting is called to order at 5:30 p.m. Roll call of board members. Mark,
Present. Yeah, I'm here.
Brad,
I'm here.
and I'm here as well. We do not have Kate Grandeski or Valerie Ingram with us today. And Sonia also is not able to be with us today. The school board will hear public comments for unscheduled public appearance received through the designated form on the district website. Patrons who wanted to comment live via Zoom should have already registered as a participant, completed the form to provide their information, and indicated they were going to provide a live comment. If you are providing your comment live as a Zoom participant, please be sure your full name is displayed in your Zoom profile. You can change that by clicking on the participants button, hover over your ID, click rename, and type in the correct information, and then select OK. Comments will be read by district staff or delivered live via Zoom at the appropriate time on the agenda and will be limited to 3 minutes. This time we're going to do the flag salute. I pledge to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which I stand, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let's go ahead and move towards introductions of audience and staff.
John O'Neill, Assistant Superintendent.
Eileen Clute, Business.
David Warner, Communications.
Kim Scheer, Director of Student Services.
Kevin Marine, Director of Human Resources.
Enrique Piñon, IT Department.
Mark Hughes. Mark Hughes, Director of Facilities, Sodexo.
Allison Samuel, Secondary Math Facilitator.
Thank you all. Anybody else?
That's it.
Wonderful. At this time, I would like to have approval for tonight's agenda. Do I
So
get
moved.
A second.
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah.
So so we have the three of us, Narce, Brad, and Mark. Thank you for approving the agenda. Are there any correspondence or celebrations to be announced at this time?
Yes. Hey, Kathy, do we actually need to go back and take a vote on that agenda?
No, we don't. It's just a formality, so we don't have to vote on that.
Copy. Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, I've got one calendar. I think Sonia is not able to make it tonight, so pretty much I'm going to do calendar notes and then I'll do my superintendent comments. Let's start with first some great news. Our FGHS mariachi students are back and excited to share beautiful music with you all. They will be doing their first performance in the city of Portland since the shutdown almost 2 years ago. They will be representing Forest Grove with a lot of excitement and pride. Thank you to PDX Jazz for inviting our mariachi students to open up for Flor de Telo Ache. They've been working hard preparing a 40-minute set for everyone to enjoy and come sing along to. So come out to the city for some great music on Sunday, February 20th with our loving and soulful comunidad. Get your tickets soon. We'll post something up on our web pages. I forget the actual site that you get those tickets through, but looks great. So we're excited for them.
It's at the Newmark Theater.
That's it.
Where it's at.
Thank you. Next on my comments, I'm going to share my screen here for a second. I want to kind of walk through where we're at with some things going on here. So we're going to start. We continue to see our situation surrounding the virus improve and improve rapidly. Last week, there was a more than 40% drop in the number of case numbers. And we're seeing this in our school system too. This is kind of the cases 7-day moving average. And again, we can see that we are dropping pretty quickly now, which is great news. It brings some optimism for us kind of moving forward. This is our pediatric numbers. Again, these are run about 2 weeks delayed here, but again, we are beginning to see drops here, and that can be better seen when we split it out by age. We're seeing a very large drop from where we were the middle of January. So again, this is good news. I will say that where we're at right now is still above where we were with the Delta surge in September. So we're not yet ready to we still need to be careful about what we're doing, but this is very, very good news for us and is pointed in the right direction. This slide is a slide that OHSU and OHA presented to superintendents last Monday. This is their current prediction for what's going to happen. And this is hospitalizations in the state, which has kind of become their new metric now that test positivity, because so many tests are being done in home and don't get reported. That's not as good of a statistic to kind of say where this pandemic is going, but this is the number that they presented to us. And the interesting thing here for us is that somewhere near the end of March is where they're back down into the rates that we were before, like last June, before the Delta came in, as things were really at a pretty low level. And that's what they're predicting is going to be happening here in the next 5 to 6 weeks. This is really exciting for us. As you know, last week, Oregon OHA laid out that they were setting March 31st as a date where they would move the decision for masking back to the local control of the district. And we're excited about this. This is good news for us. The issue here is this is still a complicated decision, and I just wanted to bring up some of those complicating factors. Now, our hope is that these cases continue to drop exactly like they predicted, and we're able to move forward. But there's a couple of things. One is that what they're telling us right now is that if there is a move back to voluntary masking, that the quarantines will change. Currently, we have test to stay, which means that if you're a close contact, all we do is test you on that same day, and then we test you 5 days later, and you get to stay in school through that time. What we're being told by ODE right now is that that's no longer, we can't use that anymore, and that they would go back to some of these quarantines that we had in the fall, where if you were within 6 feet for 15 minutes, that those might come into play. Now, I'm hearing from our meeting today with Washington County Health that OHA may be looking to rework those guidelines, which is what we would want to see. We want to keep our kids in school, and going back to the fall guidelines would be a step back for us. The other thing is liability protections would, last year, they passed a House bill that provided schools liability protections as long as we were following the guidelines that ODE and OHA put out. By the question, it would be, if we decide to do voluntary masking, would we then be giving up our liability protections? We don't have those answers yet, but those are all things that we're having to kind of take into account as we begin to move forward. We're going to continue to work with the districts around us because, again, we don't live on an island, and we want to make sure that we're working with the other districts around us. We'll meet with our labor groups because all of this impacts the working conditions of our staff. But mostly, we're going to continue to monitor what's going on. I'm going to ask everyone's patience right now because of We just need to see what's going to happen here over the next couple of weeks before we can make a final decision about what we're going to do on March 31st. There's just still too many unknowns. All of us want to be done with this and get back to some normal schooling. But we do need to just wait a little bit and see how some of this plays out. We are working with OHA and ODE around all of these issues. So that's kind of where we're at on the state mask mandate. I would take, if you have questions, I'll take them before I move on.
Dave, this is Narcy. I have a question. You might have said it and I could have missed it. Is there like a timeline for parent involvement in regards to the volunteer masking?
We'll continue to be working with folks as we're moving forward. I'll continue to put out information in our Friday communication. They'll also have the board meetings. There's still a board meeting at the end of this month, the 28th, and around March 14th is the other one. So there's still 2 more board meetings before we even get to this March 31st date. So I think it's probably in one of those that we'll hopefully have the information we need to kind of make this final decision. I've received probably 10 emails so far from different parents expressing opinions one way or the other right now.
And a question, Dave, the liability protection that you're talking about, you're waiting to get an answer on that, but that would be whether the district would be liable or not liable depending on what decision they made regarding the mask. Is that right?
Yeah, what the law says is that we have to follow the ODE and OHA guidelines. Now the question would be what they're saying, what OHA and ODE has said is, yes, on March 31st, we are going to make this decision a local decision. But then they're also saying that we are recommending that you mask until June 30th.
Oh.
So the question is that a guideline?
Okay.
And if we decided to go to voluntary masking, would that be a violation? I mean, would we opening up our ourselves to liability? We do not have an answer to that question. And every other district does not have an answer to that question yet. We're all looking for that same kind of answer.
Okay, that's a pretty big deal.
That's a big deal.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, next, I wanted to just talk briefly about, I know there's, hang on one sec here. Let me stop sharing here. At the school board meetings over the past several months, community members have shared opinions on the current situation regarding the school-based law enforcement, or our SRO. And I just wanted to let people know that since the beginning of the school year, we've been tracking data, incident data, and the rest. And we'll bring that back to the board for analysis. We've created a committee now of staff, students, and community members who are now looking at the collected data, best practices. This committee will present its findings and recommendations back to the school board. I'm expecting this to be in April. That will still give us time as we're moving forward. But I just want to make sure that people knew that we were out looking at this data and that we would bring it back to the board. It's been almost a year since that decision, so it's a good time for us to take a look and see what impact it's had on the organization. And I think those are my comments tonight.
Thank you, Dave. Any questions for Dave before we move? Thank you, Dave, for bringing back the SRO and also the engagement of community. Totally appreciate that. Next, we're going to talk about the unscheduled public appearance. So the board appreciates community members sharing information during public comments. Public comments should be submitted through the designated form and will be read by district staff and registered Zoom participants who indicated through the form they wanted to provide their comments live. Public comments will be limited to 3 minutes, as it is the protocol for board meetings. Public criticism or complaints about school district personnel are not allowed at this time. When it is your time to share your live comments, your name will be called and district staff will connect you to the meeting. Please state your name and relationship to the district before you read your comments. A district staff member will be timing the comments. They will alert you with 1 minute remaining. The Q&A is available if you are having technical problems, but it's not for public comment. Are there any comments that will be live at this time?
Yeah, Narce, we've got a couple here. The first one I can read, and then we have one that will be live, and we can Enrique will connect that individual in here when it's that time. So the first one is from Brandon Yawn, who's a parent in the district. I am being the voice of my 3 children in the Forest Grove School District. My children are tired and over the past 2 years of COVID. Their learning abilities, social lives, and mental health have been challenged just like most of our children during these tough 2 years. Athletically, I've seen minor developments in all of the youth, and this is not the right thing to do for our developing youth and teens. When the mask mandate is lifted, I hope and pray our administrators and board members do not adopt policies that force our youth to continue being masked. It is their choice, just like everything else to a certain extent, to allow them to have that choice. We don't challenge most items when it comes to having a choice: religion, sexual orientation, politics. So why should decided on a new topic now? I'm in no means challenging a pandemic in this matter, but when the mask mandate is lifted, let our children and teachers decide if they want a mask or not. This should not be an administrator, board decision, or a teacher union decision. So please stop this and let our youth be free if they please. On another topic, Mr. Parker, can you please update us on the SRO evaluation and stat findings in hopes we can bring back SROs to our schools? Respectfully, Mr. Yawn. The second one is from Emmett Wortman. Unfortunately, when he registered his comment, he wanted it to be read, but unfortunately he did not include the comment. So we encourage Mr. Wortman to resubmit that using the link on the website, and we can read that next time. The third one is from Lance Taylor, and he would like to do his live through Zoom. So Enrique, if you can add him to the meeting, we can have him read or give his comment.
Hi, my name is Lance. I'm an IA at Calc. I'm going to keep the video off for internet reasons. So I have 3 comments tonight. The first one is on masks. We should not be lifting the indoor masking requirements at the end of March. For those of us who care about the health and well-being of everyone in our community, we've had 3 ways that we've ensured that the number of people who are infected with COVID is minimized as much as possible. That's masking, distancing, and vaxxing. And now is not the time to take an axe to one of those pillars. There's only 10 weeks from the end of March to the end of the school year. We've been masking all the way since, August. We can make it through to the end and reconsider the masking stuff over the summer for the start of the next year. The second thing I want to talk about is the SRO. Schools are no place for cops, quite frankly. We need to be, again, thinking about what's best for our students. And, if the district ends up bringing the SRO back to the high school, just the whole SRO saga is going to look really disingenuous on behalf of the board. In the aftermath of George Floyd's murder, the district, goes, okay, we hear you about, these systems of incarceration and policing within our schools. So the SRO, taking out of the high school. And then, we've only been back in school, everyone in all our buildings for, like 6 months or something. And as soon as, a couple of parents start saying things about the SRO, the district immediately goes to, okay, well, we gotta listen to these super loud voices that are, a very small number of actual voices. And it's just disappointing, quite frankly, if that's what ends up happening. And the last thing I want to talk about is menstrual products in bathrooms. This is something that is lacking. They should be supplied in all school bathrooms, boys and girls restrooms, at no cost to students. Actually, this is, I mean, it's not even following the own laws of the state. I know that this is something that has been brought to the attention of at least the high school administration. But, you know, I sent an email to Brian about it at Calc, I think last week. And I know that Period Club at the high school sent an email to the admin back in like October. And there's been shoddy supply in the girls' restroom and nothing in the boys'. And I have no idea about the rest of the schools. I don't think there's anything at NAMS or Tom McCall or anything. So that, I mean, that needs to be moved up the priority list. Those are basic sanitary products. All right, that's all from me. Thank you.
So Lance, yeah, we supply menstrual products throughout our schools. So I will look into that because that's, again, part of the state law and we've already ordered those pieces. So let me check into, you say you've already contacted the high school administration?
Yeah, so Period Club emailed the high school administration at the end of October. And I know there's something in the girls' restroom there, but from what I've heard, it's not supplied super well. And I mean, I was there a week and a half ago and there's nothing in the boys' restroom. And then at Calc, we have nothing. We have 2 bathrooms at Calc, but there's no menstrual products or dispensers or anything.
Yep, we can take care of that. Karen, I see you put your video on.
Yeah, so we were, the dispensers have been back ordered and have been delayed time and time again. So we finally went and got baskets and put the supplies in the baskets. Calc was going to be delivered today, I believe. So every bathroom does have them and they're being restocked.
Gotcha. Thank you. Thanks, Lance.
Thank you.
On behalf of the board, we appreciate the comments, and I believe that Superintendent Parker has talked about the SRO, future conversations, as well as a mask, and then most recently the menstrual products. So we look forward to hearing more on that. At this time, we're going to go ahead and move to the consent agenda. The consent agenda is made up of routine, non-controversial items to be voted on under one motion. Are there any items within the consent items a board member or the superintendent wishes to discuss separately? At this time, we need a motion to consent the agenda. Is that correct, Kathy? Can we have a motion?
Yes, a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Yeah, I move that we approve the consent agenda.
And I second.
Thank you. Board meetings of the January 24th meeting.
Hey, Narce, we do need to get a vote on that.
We need to do a vote, yeah.
Sorry about that.
Nope,
can we get a vote on that? Say aye or raise your hand.
You got to do.
I'll go around. Brad?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. So at this point, okay, so I did do that. At this point, we're going to, and thank you for bearing with me. This is my first time chairing the school board meeting.
All good.
So I appreciate the patience. At this time, we're moving to personnel. We need to, board minutes.
That's all part of the consent, Narcy.
Okay,
so you can just go on to the presentations.
So at this time, we're going to go with the presentation.
Perfect. I'm going to start it out here. Let's see. Here we go. We're going to start this with, last week was National School Counseling Week, and it highlights the tremendous impact our school counselors have and can have in helping students achieve kind of their school success plan. To show recognition and gratitude, our amazing counselors in our district, the Student Services Department asked counselors throughout the district to share their thoughts on several different prompts centered around the theme Better Together. The counselors shared those thoughts, took a photo of themselves, and then we began to share these out on social media last week. Our schools are also recognize their counselors with a get to know your counselor questions, which were also shared. These are kind of some of the get to know your counselors. Again, I want to thank all of our counselors for the work that they're doing every day in service to our students. All of us have been through a lot, and our counselors are out there serving students every day. Thank you to all of our counselors.
I would like to echo the same. Thank you for all the work you do. I know it's not easy, especially during these COVID times. I know there's a lot of anxiety for our students. So thank you for that. Any other comments? All right. Next, we have the audit RFP by Eileen.
Thank you. So tonight we have our audit RFP. We went out for an RFP for auditing services back in December. We've been through the process and our evaluation committee that consisted of Brad Bafero, Valerie Ingram, David Parker, me, Dustin Geddes, and Elena Santana reviewed the submittal. We did only have one from Polly Rogers. They are a highly qualified auditing firm that specializes in school district and government audits within our state. They've been doing our audit since 2004. And so the recommendation tonight is to award the RFP to Polly Rogers. It is a 3-year contract with options to extend for 2 additional years.
Do we have any questions, or do we move? We need a motion to Eileen's approval.
I move to accept the Polly Rogers contract for the next 3 years.
Second.
All those in favor, Mark?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. Thank you, Eileen.
Thank you.
Actually, you are next again.
Yes. So the second thing we have tonight is the Elementary Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund, the capital projects. Typically with federal funds and capital projects, we don't have to get board approval unless the project goes over 50,000 and meets our regular purchasing requirements. However, with the additional increased scrutiny over the capital funds and how they're being used for ESSER funds, ODE has put in an additional layer that requires board approval of anything over 25,000. And so tonight we have a few big ticket items that we are looking at moving forward with. And this would be the first step. So we're looking at getting concept approval from the board. Then we would need to go get ODE's approval because it's over $5,000 in federal funds. And then once we go through that, Mark Hughes, our facilities director, will start with getting the scope and everything defined, bids, and go through that process. If things are over 50,000, we would then bring it back to the board and go through our regular purchasing. So tonight we're looking at concept approval for how our capital projects for our ESSER funds. We're looking about $3.4 million between ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 in capital projects. The majority of it is in HVAC and controls projects, and this would go across several different buildings. So it would be Dilley, Echo Shaw, Fern Hill, Gales Creek, Harvey Clark, Tom McCall, and the high school. With these, the goal is really to improve the filtration and the airflow of underperforming HVAC units. The second big project would be updating window systems in the east wing at Dilley and then the south facing windows at Harvey Clark to get more operable window systems so that we can increase the outside airflow. The third big project is the NAMS chiller replacement. The chiller itself is $275,000, and then we would have the additional costs for installation and everything else we would have with that, but the scope we're still defining. And that would do maintain indoor air temperatures and control the CO2 levels. It's kind of another phase to what we've already done at NAMS with increasing the air exhaust systems and the boilers. So this is that third step in that project. And then the last one is some safety and security updates. And that's just installing a few more key card accesses and a couple more cameras to be able to enable more social distancing. So those are the major projects that we are looking at getting approved to start doing that. We would like to get all of these projects done this summer while the buildings are open. And Mark is, sorry. Mark is here to answer any questions if you have specifics about any particular project too.
So I have a question, Mark, regarding the NAMS chiller.
Yes, go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I know Eileen described it as 275 for, I don't know, that's not the, I gathered that it wasn't the total cost, right?
Correct.
So I guess my question is, do you have any sense of, what that total cost might be?
We're estimating probably in the close to 400,000 for everything.
Okay.
Yeah, as this is preliminary, we don't know exactly. We have a pretty good idea because what we're doing is replicating what's at the high school as far as the cooling units.
Okay.
And so we found we got a pretty good idea. So that's how we came up to the 400,000 with all the peripheral work that goes on around it.
And
Okay.
Mark,
yeah. Oh.
the goal would be that the rebates that we would get off of SB 1149 and Energy Trust on the HVAC stuff would offset any increase in that. So that's why I didn't increase the cost. We found that out kind of last minute after the board packet went out, but we figured between those two, the overall should be fine.
I see. Okay. And I guess that, so the total cost is around 3.4, I think is what you said.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm looking up above, Eileen, and it's like 13,400,000. Is that right? And
That is the total ESSER funds that we got district-wide between ESSER 1, 2, and 3.
okay.
But those funds are being used on interventions and COVID, air filtration. Some of it's already been spent. We have some health aids out there. So there's a lot of other things that are happening with it.
Okay.
This is just one piece.
Okay. I guess my question is, where are we on that? I think the 13.4 number, do you have, is this, when we spend the 3.4, do we have $1 million left? Do we have 5 million? I mean, do you know or have an idea of that?
I can get you the specifics in the Friday memo this week, but we should have enough to continue with the current ESSER interventions and health aids in the buildings and some online support or online school next year.
Okay.
We'll have enough to do all of those things for one more year.
Okay, got it. Okay, thank you.
Eileen, I think this expenditure was kind of what we had already budgeted for HVAC improvements. So what we're putting out in front of you was actually what we originally budgeted for these things.
Okay.
Right.
Okay, I just wanted a general overview of because the 13.4 is a pretty big number, and I have no sense of where we are on that. So thank you.
Our hope was to set aside some for the HVAC and then split the difference between this year and next year. A little bit less next year, so it's kind of a phase down approach and more of it spent this year, but to split it over the 2 years so that we weren't utilizing it all at once.
Okay.
So that was our goal when we were doing the budget for it.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
It might help for future information, whether it's via the Friday board or just some sort of graph of how much money has been spent on humans, and then also such as coolers and equipment.
I had back in the fall, I did an ESSER update for everybody, and I had a pie graph that showed kind of what we were planning on doing with the big major categories. So I could send that out too. And that was the whole budget for ESSER 1, 2, and 3, if that would be helpful.
I think that would help us.
Okay. Can I ask one other question, Eileen? So did I hear you say that the ESSER funds will be spent by the end of next year? Is that correct? Or
They have to be spent by September 30th of 2020.
Okay.
For 2020, yeah, 2024. So it'd be the end of next year.
The following, 2 years?
Yep, September 30th of 2024.
Okay.
ESSER 1 is up already. ESSER 2, I think, is phased in. And then the last bit is September of 2024.
Okay, all right, thanks.
So Eileen, what kind of motion do you need from us?
I am looking for a motion to recommend the capital project concepts as presented.
So moved.
I second.
Wonderful. So roll call. Mark?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well.
Okay.
Thank you, Eileen.
Thank you.
So next we have the staff MacBook refreshed by Enrique Piñon.
Thank you. The action item before you today is the request for the approval of the staff MacBook refresh that is part of the technology plan. This purchase was already approved as part of the 2021-2022 budget for the school, but we do now have our updated quotes, and so we are ready to move forward with the purchase. This purchase will be to replace our older MacBooks ranging from 2012 to 2015 models. So they are showing their age. We're finding performance issues, and the applications that staff are now using to teach, and also the demands of remote instruction is showing that these devices do need to be replaced in order to provide the teachers with the right hardware. The district did receive approval from USAC with the Emergency Connectivity Fund, the ECF. That was another layer of the stimulus money. Along with that, there are ESSER funds that were budgeted for this purchase. And those are the two sources of funding for this refresh. The vendor is Apple. And they are a sole source provider. This is due to the management needs of the devices. In order to manage them as we do, the devices need to be purchased directly through Apple. So our recommendation to the board is to approve the purchase of the MacBook Air refresh from Apple as part of our 21-22 staff device refresh. And I'll be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
So Enrique, will you be able to get these?
Good question. Just like I think Karen and Eileen have mentioned, supply chains right now are quite strained. As of right now, we're being told that yes. Okay. Other devices keep getting pushed further and further back. So as of right now, we're being told we should have these prior to the end of the year. So obviously things can change, but that's what we're being told right now.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Enrique. So I move to approve the purchase of the MacBook Air from Apple as part of the 2021-22 staff device refresh.
Second.
Roll for call. Mark?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. Thank you, Enrique, and good luck with getting all those computers.
Thank you.
Okay, future action items. We have the Northwest Regional Education Service District 22-23 local service plan. Superintendent Parker.
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen again and just review. You've got in your board packet, kind of the full piece here, but just wanted to run over several of the items here. There we go. The first piece is tonight I'm presenting the local service plan for the Northwest Regional ESD. Through the ESD, we receive core services that all districts inside of the regional ESD pick up. And then we also have other services that we purchase through our service credits. The first slide that I'm showing you tonight is going to be just their assumptions as they built this plan. It was basically built on a $9.3 billion state school fund, 51% in the second year. PERS rates were consistent with 21-22, and then they've got allocation based on the higher enrollment of earlier. And then the core service changes in technology and instruction. There's some small changes that they've made there, but this is all pretty standard. This is what we would have expected them to base this on. It shows their total budget here is broken out by $53 million is what they received from the state. They take 10% of it for their operations, and then they begin splitting it out. There's some money that goes directly to Beaverton and Hillsborough being the two largest districts. And then there's core services that everybody else in the region receive. For us, I took and I kind of, in your packet, it's page 23 and 24. And it's basically what we're doing, what we use it for here in Forest Grove. And I thought this would be interesting. In our core is substitute management services. So we contract with them to provide our substitutes. We also get our Infinite Visions and our Synergy through the ESD. And you can see there's about $696,000 that we pay for these core services. And then all the rest of it is basically our service credits. And if you take a look there, service credit spending by service area in the bottom piece there's basically 313,000 is special ed. We have about 93,000 in technology. That would again be our data warehouse, our Infinite Visions. Instruction, we do contract with them around attendance services, diverse educator pathway program. We have, we're also involved in some of their work around ninth grade on track status. So there's definitely some things. I will say that nobody's really been able to get very active in instruction and professional development just because we just haven't had access to our staff for a while. That would be something that would be encouraged in continuing to work with them on. But on this slide, or the base gist, I added one more slide here because they kind of go into a little more depth on kind of what exactly they do. Our early intervention, early childhood evaluations. We did 123 different evaluations, 187 babies, children receive services. Social emotional learning, our folks who, Cassie and our folks who work also coordinate with the ESD. Substitute services, Medicaid, Northwest Promise. Those are all, I kind of wanted to just give you a feeling for some of the things we're doing. Other than that, this is a pretty standard local service plan. There's not a whole lot that is significantly different. I did want to point out one of the things that we have been using the ESD for is their grant writer. And we received almost $900,000 in grants utilizing their grant writing. So that's been a very productive part of working with ESD. So with that, I would say, other than the fact that we're hoping to expand our work with professional development, it's a pretty standard. I did get, it's not in your packet, it just came out, but it looks like there's going to be about a 2.5% increase in cost is what they're going, which feels pretty reasonable compared to some of the conversations we're having around increases in salaries in other districts and such. So I don't think that's out of line with where they're at. And with that, I would take any questions that you might have about the LSP.
Dave, I have a question. You mentioned the professional development, and I understand, with all of the pivoting that has to take place in regards to COVID. But what are some of the themes for professional development? Does it involve all the icons in the circle, or is it something else?
They actually have several different, and I'm probably going to miss some, but one of their big structures is working on ninth grade on track behavior. So they work with high schools all across the region, kind of working on how do we increase on track. We've got some preschool that's going on. There's a lot of interest in how we expand preschool. I know I'm starting into, and I'm excited about we're beginning to talk about instructional rounds, starting with superintendents and beginning to build some structures inside of districts to begin to do the instructional round process. There's a MTSS group that's working with the ESD, coordinating with all of the districts in the region around MTSS. I'm sure I'm missing a couple of things here that I'm looking across that. Diverse educator pathways, we're working with them. John, you help me out here. What am I missing?
Real quick, also the instructional coaching.
All right.
They've been instrumental in Dr. Knight's role in instructional coaches.
And, I'll try and follow up, Narce, because I want to say there's like 5 strands that they're kind of focused on, but I'll get that from Dan, their superintendent, and send it across to you.
Thank you. Any other questions, Mark or Brad? Anybody else? No? Okay. Thank you for that presentation, Mr. Parker. Next, we have the Forest Grove High School Plan Course Statement, Math Sequence, first reading by Mr. O'Neill.
Yes, thank you. In November 2021, the State Board of Education adopted new high school math standards in a 2+1 course model, which we will share with you this evening. We are fortunate to have Ms. Allison Samuel as our secondary math facilitator, who worked closely with Oregon Department of Education in the development of these new revisions. Tonight, she will present a quick overview in a PowerPoint as a first read. We will include the PowerPoint for your board's future reference for the next board meeting and when we come back for a second reading and action. And at the conclusion of this presentation, Allison, myself, and Principal Karen O'Neill will be available to answer any questions from the board. Allison, at this time, do you mind sharing your screen?
Good evening. So with this presentation, I'm hoping to give you a quick overview of the new math standards and course alignment that was adopted by the State Board of Education, and then how that leads to the planned course statements that we are doing for our first read this evening. So I am Allison Samuel. I'm the secondary math facilitator, and I have been working closely with 5 members of the high school math department. And we meet together as a group of 5, and then we break into 2 subcommittees. One subcommittee is geometry and one is data science, as those are where the 2 big changes are for the high school standards. So the timeline that ODE has, it's still considered a draft, but in November 21, they did adopt the new state standards. So that's that kind of maroon colored one. Next year, the 22-23 school year, we are wanting to do the early high school course pilots. So we will be hopefully piloting these new 3 courses that we are wanting to bring to the high school. And the 8th grade will also be making some minor changes to their course sequencing. That does not going to really affect K-7 at all. And then as you can see through the timeline, it rolls into where eventually the SBA, formerly known as the SBAC, but no C anymore, so it's SBA, will be changing to align with these new standards. So the new standards are coming in first, and then the assessment is changing. So for the high school, which is where the main changes are, the 25-26 school year is where this test will change, which is our current 7th graders. So there's very minor impacts to K-7. Mostly changes in wording. There's one additional data science standard that's been added to 4 of the different grade levels, but there's very little change or impact to those grades. Grade 8 has a little bit more impact. Again, it's mostly just wording and categorization, but there are 3 standards that are changing. 2 of them are moving content up to the high school out of 8th grade, and 1 is just allowing for students to know how to use formulas, but not have to memorize formulas. The major impact is to the high school. So they cut approximately 65% of the standards that were in the high school math standards previously. Some major things is they did take out any of the Algebra 2 or advanced math standards. So now the current standards are designed for 1 year of algebra, a semester of geometry, and a semester of data science, which is the 2 years in the 2+1 model. And I'll explain the 2+1 model in just a few slides, a little more in depth. There's also been some wording and categorization changes. One of those main changes is that instead of calling it statistics and probability, it's now been called data science, and it has changed the wording and the intent of some of those standards. And it's also added 1 completely new standard. The only other new standard was in number and quantity, and then it has another standard that was pretty radically changed. The rest of the standards that are in the new standards were old ones that have been kept. So nothing else has been changed. ODE is working with higher education to change college admission requirements so that we have options other than just Algebra 2, which is where the +1 comes in the 2+1 model, which again, I'll explain a little bit more in a few slides. So they're really working on a foundational algebra, geometry, data science for everybody, and then having a 3rd year be options where Algebra 2 is one of the options, but there could be other choices for students. So this is what the 2+1 model looks like. It reads from the bottom up, and on the right-hand side, I have added the courses that do exist or we're hoping will exist at the high school. So the first year, that first Math 1 year is Algebra 1 or Everyday Algebra. And then the second year would be GDS Geometry and GDS Data Science, which are 2 of the new courses that we are bringing to you today. The GDS just stands for Geometry Data Science. It was a way to indicate in our schedule that they're the semester-long versions of those classes. We do have year-long versions of those classes also that we're hoping to have available, which would make the 2 years actually extend to be 3 years. It would be 1 year of algebra, 1 year of geometry or data science, and then a 3rd year of whichever they didn't take the 2nd year. So the other geometry or data science. That would still meet the 3 years of graduation requirement. It also would cover all of the information that's on the ESPA test, because the ESPA test only covers those contents. The +1 part is what happens after that. Currently, we have Algebra 2 or Transition Algebra 2 as our options. Once ODE and secondary and the higher education get on the same page with college admissions, we're hoping to add some other options at that +1 level. And then we still have pre-calculus statistics, AP statistics above that. And then I didn't include it on the slide, but we still have our AP calculus track after pre-calculus. So the change in the mathematics sequence, these are just 3 common tracks that students follow through our math sequence. I've shown the strikeout of what used to be there, and the yellow highlight is what we're hoping to change it to. Not every student moves through the tracks in these ways. They're able to jump between tracks based on performance. And our highest track kids who start in Algebra 2 in 9th grade, I did not include on the slide because there were no changes. So this reads left to right. So a student entering 9th grade in Everyday Algebra could then take geometry or data science in the year-long version, the 10th grade year. Then they would take whichever one they didn't take their 10th grade year during the 11th grade. And then their 12th grade year, they can choose to take either Transition Algebra 2 or regular Algebra 2, whichever they feel that they're ready for. Another option would be if they start in regular Algebra 1, and again, they would go across. This time it would be with the semester classes. So the GDS Geometry and GDS Data Science, which would cover both of those in 1 year. And then they'd move on to Algebra 2 and Advanced Math. And then you can see on the bottom there, they start in the GDS version and go from there. So the new courses that we're hoping to add to the high school, again, that committee of 5 teachers and myself have been meeting. The GDS geometry and GDS data science classes are semester long. They stand alone, which means they can be taken in any order, and you don't have to pass one of them in order to be able to be qualified to take the other. They don't relate to each other. And it would cover all of the standards for geometry and data science. We're also looking at a year-long data science course that would cover the same thing as the GDS data science, but go at a slightly slower pace and also review some of those key algebra concepts from that first year in the 2+1 model. And then we were hoping to change our current year-long geometry course to make sure it's only covering the new standards that are covered in GDS geometry, and again, adding some key review of algebra concepts. Some additional course modifications that will be needed. Everyday algebra, algebra 1, transition algebra 2, and algebra 2 will all need some minor modifications, not enough to need new planned course statements, but minor modifications to flow nicely in and out of these new courses and to accommodate the new algebra standards, which again haven't changed. They've just eliminated things. They haven't added a lot of new standards. I will be working closely with all 4 of those PLCs to make those modifications. And then some future considerations. We do teach Algebra 1 and geometry currently at NAMS. And so we would be changing those courses as well. We look at changing NAMS 1 year behind or 1 year after the high school changes. So if the high school changes to GGS, geometry, and data science next year, NAMS will be changing the year after that. And that just allows for a smoother transition for them so that we're not trying to create things and change things at the same time we're trying to communicate with another building. It just makes a smoother transition for them. That still meets well within the timeline that ODE has stated we need to have in order to meet the new testing requirements. And then hopefully we'll be able to pilot some of those +1 classes at the high school. And again, that may be dependent on how the higher education ends up changing or looking at their admissions requirements. So the purpose of the presentation, again, was just to give you a quick overview of the changes in the state standards and then the 3 courses that we're bringing to you today for a first read, which are the GDS Geometry, GDS Data Science, and the year-long data science classes. Those courses have all been approved through the mathematics department at the high school and through the leadership team. And I know this is a lot of information kind of all at once. So I will be taking questions now. Mrs. and Mr. O'Neill are also here for questions, but we will be coming back for a second read at the next board meeting. So if you have questions that come up between now and then, you're welcome to ask them then. I'm also available for email anytime or to call me at my district office phone, and I'm happy to answer questions in between then as well. But right now we can open if you have any questions that have come to your mind so far.
I just have one question right now, and that is when is the SBA going to assess these standards for students?
So it's the 24-25 school year is when the high school test changes.
Okay.
So it's this year's 7th graders. So if we make the changes next year, then they will have gone through all of the changes and have all the changes for their test.
I have a couple of questions. Thank you for this presentation. Lots of math, lots of changes. Absolutely. I can only imagine the layer of work that needs to be done. And working in higher ed myself at a private institution, there has been quite a bit of conversation about the data science and also us having to pivot to align with the school districts. So 2 questions. I know in the previous slide, you mentioned the taking a peek to see what the Oregon public higher ed institutions are doing. What about private? Has there been conversations about that, private universities?
There has. The private universities is harder because they're not as organized per se. They don't have like a group. The Oregon university system, because they somewhat talk together, is where ODE is starting. Right now, they haven't talked a lot with private universities. I know they've talked quite a bit with California because the California public university system has already made this change to their admissions requirements. They now have 6 or 7 different courses that Algebra 2 is just one of that they accept for admissions into their universities. But Oregon's not as far as California yet in that system rollout.
We actually do, and I can send that information later to Mr. O'Neill. We do actually have a private, Oregon private university, I guess we can call it consortium.
Okay.
It's called the Alliance, where topics such as this can come up.
That would be great. I would love to take that back to my the Oregon math leaders with ODE, where I meet with when we've been talking about this. I think they'd be really interested in that.
Absolutely. So I'll send that contact information to Mr. O'Neill. Are you okay with that?
Absolutely. Thank you. Great idea.
And then my other question is just out of ignorance. You mentioned it at our earlier slides that there's no, based on the standards, there's not a need for memorizing formulas. So what's the logic about that? I'm old school. We have to memorize everything.
Yeah, there's really been it's kind of a push and pull, because with technology, how it is today, you can look up everything. I can Google a formula, I can look it up on my phone. And so why do I need to memorize anything? Of course, mathematics professors and math teachers, well, you need to understand where the formula comes from. And if you understand where the formula comes from, it's not really memorizing. And so there's been kind of a back and forth on that. And where they've ended up is that they have kind of a bank of formulas. So the students will still need to be able to recognize which one is which, but they don't have to flat out memorize them completely.
Got it. Thank you for educating me on that.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have any other questions? Mr. O'Neill, does that conclude your presentation, your group presentation?
Yes, ma'am, it does. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you all. I learned a lot. Thank you. Next, we have, do we have any board member, do any board members have anything to share or add to the current list of future items?
I don't know.
I don't.
Very well. Thank you. So information, just reminding everybody about what was included in the package, which was the enrollment report, financial reports, and healthy and safe schools, HASS plan. Just a reminder. At this point, at 6:30, there's, Kathy, it's time for me to adjourn the meeting. Is that correct? At 6:35?
Yep, that's correct.
Very well. Meeting adjourned.
Good job, Narcy.
Thank you.
Nice job.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Night.